Hello, Curran here. I'm here to talk about front-end development in Linux. We'll discuss Ubuntu Linux setup, using the terminal, installing Chrome, authoring HTML with text editors, learning Vim if you want to, installing VSCode, JavaScript basics, using JavaScript libraries, and setting up your first project with NodeJS and Vite. You don't necessarily need to do all this setup if you just want to start coding. I mean, you could use cloud-based IDEs for learning. But if you want to get into the nitty-gritty and set up your local development environment like a pro, here's how. I just installed Ubuntu Linux, and this is about as fresh as it gets. If you go and download Ubuntu Linux and install it on a computer, this is probably what you'll see. I usually pretty much ignore all this onboarding stuff. You don't have to set up live patch. Let me just click through all this stuff. Okay, cool. Done. And then software updater. Yeah, you could click install now and it would work, but let me show you what this is really doing. If you hit the Windows key and then start typing TERM, that'll get you to a terminal. And this is the place where most of the work happens in Linux. Sudo apt update, and then you have to enter your password, is the command that will check for software updates. And this is something I always do, on a fresh install. And then sudo apt upgrade will actually install these various updates. This is always a good idea, just to make sure you have all the latest stuff. Installing additional packages is blocked, by the way, while this is running, so you just have to wait it out. In the meantime, though, we can open up Firefox so that we can download Chrome. If you just search for Chrome, click through download Chrome, this will download a .deb file, and it's done. For front-end development, I would say Chrome is where it's at. You pretty much need to be using Chrome for the dev tools, if for nothing else. To install what we just downloaded, we can cd, change directory, into /downloads, and tilde is your home directory. ls will list the files there. And then there's some command that we need to install a .deb file, and I can never remember it. Manual installation. There it is. Yeah, that's the one. Sudo dpkg-i. And then if you start typing GOO and then hit tab, it will autocomplete for you. And now, if you click on this little thing here or hit the Windows key, you can search for Chrome. And there it is. And it runs. And yeah, I'll just click through all that. All right, now we're in a position to start doing web development. All right, let me close out all of this stuff, including the terminal. And let's make a web page. We can make a new folder on the desktop here called whatever you want. I'll call it dev. And then we can get into that from the terminal by saying cd, change directory, /desktop. ls, we can see dev is there. cd dev, ls, it's empty. Now in Linux, in Ubuntu Linux in particular, there's this program called gedit, GNOME edit, I think it's called, index.html. I think this will pull up a text editor where we can edit this file. It's just a text file called index.html. And we can type hello world in this text file and save it. And then we can open up this dev folder and double click on index.html. And now it says hello world in the browser. It's our first web page. Now, this is not valid HTML necessarily. I like to use JS bin as a way to find a super nice clean template for HTML that you can just copy paste right into this code. So if we right click this and say open with gedit, oh, you gotta click view all applications, text editor, there it is. And then we paste in that whole thing. In the body now, we can say hello HTML and save it and close it and then refresh this page and now it says hello HTML. Alright, but people don't use gedit to write code. They use VSCode usually or Vim. If you're crazy like me, let me show you how I use Vim. Back in our terminal, we could just type vim index.html. Oh, it's not installed. Well, let's install it. Just copy paste that, enter the password, type Y to continue. And now let's try it. Vim index.html. And here it is. I'll fix the indentation a little bit. Now we get syntax highlighting. And since this is, intro to front-end development, let me just say briefly what these parts are in this page. Doctype HTML tells browsers that it's a relatively modern version of HTML. Everything is inside the HTML opening and closing tags to say, all right, this is the content of our HTML document. Inside the head is stuff that's not visible necessarily, but has some impact on the page, like the character set. This is for, just so the browser knows exactly how to interpret the text. The viewport, this thing makes it look decent on mobile. And then the title will show up in your browser tab. So let me change this to be like hello HTML. And then the body contains stuff that is actually visible on the page. So you could put something like an H1 element, which is a heading 1. It's like my first web page. And then you have to close the tag like this. And then if you save it and then go back to the browser and refresh it, now it says my first web page. If you want to learn Vim, which I would highly recommend, there's this thing called Vim Tutor, VIMTUTOR. This is how I learned Vim. I was at an airport one time with 3 hours on my hands. I just went through this thing. It's a document that opens up in Vim, and then you need to use Vim to navigate through this. So moving the cursor is H, L, J, and K. This is actually what I use all the time to move the cursor around. And then colon gets you into this space where you can type commands like Q for quit or W for write, save the file. So if you've got some time on your hands, I would highly, highly recommend going through this and learning Vim because it's dope. However, if you want to be a little more mainstream, use VS Code. Well, let's install VS Code by clicking on that thing and then typing software, Ubuntu software. This is a cool thing that lets you search packages available for Ubuntu. So if we just search VS Code, it comes up and it's called, interestingly, just code, which is fine. So I'll click install. You could do this on the command line if you wanted to with sudo apt install and then the name of the package. All right, now VS Code is installed. And then we start it up like this. VS Code. Here we go. We can exit out of this get started thing and say file, open, folder, navigate to the desktop and then go to dev and hit open. And VS Code is a little bloated in my opinion. There's all these little widgets and things you have to click through all the time, like I trust the authors, But anyway, here's index.html inside of VSCode. And we can edit it. We could say my first web page with VS Code. And I'll delete that hello HTML. Hit Control S to save it. Oh, I probably should have exited out Vim before doing that. Oh, it says it's changed. Okay, I'll load it up. But now I'll quit Vim. And quit the whole terminal with Control-Shift-Q. And then if we want to see the result of our change, we go back to our browser and say refresh, and there it is. All right, there's like a basic workflow. But you may be wondering, how do I use JavaScript libraries? Well, if you're using vanilla HTML, which is what this is, meaning no build tools, no packages for creating a bundle or anything, you could just put a script tag in the head here and say src, the source for this JavaScript file, will be some URL. And this is where we can use a CDN, content distribution network, like Unpackage or JS Deliver. I had some issues with Unpackage, so let's try JS Deliver. We can copy one of these URLs here and paste it in here to get the library. And this is what it looks like when you pull in a JavaScript library. It's a bunch of mumbo jumbo, which is the result of minification. This is jQuery. Let's try D3, my all-time favorite JavaScript library. Here it is. Here's all of D3. This will give you the latest version. If we put a trailing slash, we get this nice index page that tells us the specific version that we're at. And we can put that version at the end of the URL to get a stable link. This won't change over time. And if we want the URL to be even nicer and point to an actual JavaScript file, we can click through like this. And there it is, d3 at this version /dist/d3.min.js. Over in VS Code, we can now paste that in. And then let's put some JavaScript onto this page. Let's put it in the body so that it runs after everything in the head runs, including the thing that loads in D3. We can make a script tag here and say console.log hello JavaScript. I'll save that and verify that that much worked by going back to Chrome and opening up the Dev Tools, which is under this menu, under More Tools, and then Developer Tools. The Dev Tools are where it's at. You're going to need to use the Dev Tools an awful lot. You can dock it to the bottom like this, and the font size can be changed with Control plus minus. And then if you go to the Console tab, this is where we'll see our output. So when I refresh, it says hello JavaScript. And this, by the way, is an interactive shell, a REPL, a read, eval, print loop. So you can even type in console.log hello and hit enter. I like using the console to prove out various self-contained ideas. And while we're here, let me just give a brief intro to JavaScript. Const variable equals foo. Like, this is how you make variables. If we try to reset that to be bar, we can't because it's using const, which is short for constant. If you want to make it reassignable, we can use let. Let's say x equals 0. And then we can get back the value of x and then reassign to x. X equals 5, like this. In JavaScript, there are arrays like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you could say r.length and give you 4. You could use functional programming to do things like map over this array and pass a function that takes as input d, one of these numbers, and returns or now d times 2. That will map over your values. And then in JavaScript, there are objects, which are like dictionaries in Python, I think. So we can represent people's names, for example. There's an object representing Joe Schmo. And then we can say console.log obj, and it looks like that. And it gives you this nice inspector thing. All right, well, let's check that this library actually loaded. We can do that by saying console.log d3. D3 here is a browser global. It's a global variable that gets introduced from this script. I'll save that and go back to Chrome and refresh. And sure enough, it outputs an object with all the various functions attached to it from D3. But surely we won't be just, writing a .html file. We want to author our code with ES modules that lets us split complexity across a lot of files, and we want to have a production grade build that minifies everything, and we want to be able to install packages from NPM, Node Package Manager. Nowadays, Vite is, I think, the best tooling for front-end development. So I'll show you how to get started with Vite. Vite, next generation front-end tooling. Get started. Scaffolding your first Vite project. Yeah, this is what we want. Let's open up Terminal, and let's go back into our dev directory. And then I'll try to run this command, npm create Vite at latest, and oh, npm is not found. Right. Now, it says it can be installed with sudo apt install npm, but do not do this. You're probably going to get a dated version of Node, and your system will be borked. npm is part of NodeJS. NodeJS is runs JavaScript in the terminal, and this is the foundation for all modern day build tooling around JavaScript. I found the best way to install Node in Linux is using this thing called NVM, Node Version Manager. And here's how we can do that. All right, here's the install and update script for NVM. We have two options here. One uses curl and the other uses wget. These are both commands that will execute HTTP requests. But the thing about curl is it's there by default on a Mac, and wget is there by default on Linux. So I'm going to use this wget command, and I'll paste that in the terminal and hit enter. It worked. It just says close and reopen your terminal. So that's what I'll do. Actually, I'll just make a new tab here with Control-Shift-T. Super useful to have multiple tabs in your terminal. And now we should have the NVM command available. And yes, indeed we do. Now we can run NVM install Node. And this will install the latest version of Node.js. Now we should have the npm command available. All right, great. So now we can go back and start up our Vite project. All right, under scaffold your first Vite project, let's copy this command here and paste it in the terminal. It's asking for a project name. I'll just name it that. The amazing thing about Vite is that it has templates or starter projects for various frameworks, including React and Svelte and Vue. But for now, let's just use vanilla. So I'll hit enter. It also supports TypeScript if you want to use that, which is a super cool typed variant of JavaScript. But for now, let's just use plain old JavaScript. Wonderful. Now it says run cd Vite project, and then run npm install. The npm install command installs the dependencies that are listed in package.json. And then we can run npm run dev. And it started up the dev server. Fantastic. Now we can go to this URL, and in the Linux terminal you can control click on URLs to open them in the browser. And here it is. Hello Vite. It's got a counter in here. This is the Vite boilerplate code that it comes with. Let's take a look at that code. In VSCode, I'm going to open up that folder. It's under dev Vite project. And check it out. All these files were provisioned for us. There's index.html. This has just a few more things than our previous template, notably this icon. This line defines the icon that is shown in the browser tab, so you could customize that if you'd like. I think I'll just remove it though. I like to just remove all the boilerplate that comes with Vite when I start a new project. And we can change the title, hello HTML. Inside of the body, we have a div that has an ID of app. This is a pretty common pattern where in your HTML, all you do is define a div, but then when the JavaScript runs, it will select that div and then put stuff into it programmatically. Notice that the script tag here has type equals module. This is a relatively new way of using JavaScript files that supports ES6 modules, which let you split up logic across files. And then the source for this is main.js. Let's take a look at main.js. Okay, it's got a bunch of overwhelming boilerplate in here, which I'm just going to delete. We can write our own JavaScript and say console.log hello Vite. Now in the browser it says hello Vite. When you're using Vite or Next.js or Create React App or any of these various tools, Webpack, Rollup, the way that you work with libraries is a little different than with vanilla HTML. Dependencies are expressed in package.json. When you run npm install, npm looks at this file and analyzes the field dev dependencies and also another field, which we don't have yet, called dependencies, that lists out all the packages that your project depends on. These packages come from the npm registry. So for example, Vite is a package here, jQuery, like we saw before in the CDN, is also a package here, and so is D3, my all-time favorite package. To use this package, we can run npm I D3 like this, and by the way, I is short for install, and if we just run this, it will install it, but it will not modify our package.json, which I want it to do. So for that, I'm going to add a dash uppercase S, meaning save, and that's equivalent to dash dash save, which is just a longer form. So I'll run this, and now D3 is installed, and we can take a look at node modules. This is where all of the packages get installed to. And by the way, you never want to track this node modules directory in Git or any other version control because it gets huge and it's derived from package.json. But anyway, inside of this folder, there are all these various packages now, including D3. And D3 has what's called transitive dependencies on the various D3 packages that are all listed out here. See, when you add a dependency with npm install, it actually installs its dependencies, and its dependencies dependencies, and its dependencies dependencies dependencies, and so on, until all the transitive dependencies are installed. Now that that's installed, see we have a dependencies field here in package.json, and it lists out D3 at the current version. Now that this is here, we can go into main.js and say import something from D3. D3 has a number of named exports, like select, for example. And I'll just console.log select to see what it is and to see if this importing actually worked. And sure enough, in the browser, it prints out this gobbledygook, which means D3 has loaded properly. All right, that's how you can set up a local development environment for front-end development in Linux. Now, let me tell you just briefly about VizHub. If you're taking my course and watching this video as part of my course, we're going to use VizHub, not local development, for the assignments and whatnot. VizHub is a platform that I built to support teaching this course, and you can sign in with GitHub. So you need a GitHub account first. And then you can create a viz by forking an existing viz, like this D3 starter. You can fork by clicking this icon here. You could change the name if you want to. And then click fork. And then you've got this editor panel on the side where you can change the README, which is the description that shows down there. I'll just delete all of that. We've got index.html, and I'll just simplify this so it looks like what we had before. The title can be modified here, and it actually updates over here too. The main difference between what you'll see in things like Vite and VizHub is that VizHub sort of tries to approximate the experience of developing with something like Vite. It lets you use this ES6 import syntax. But actually what it's doing is it's pulling D3 from a CDN, and then it's, transpiling this code into bundle.js, which is a generated file that you normally don't have to look at. So when you edit index.js, bundle.js updates automatically, and the Vite dev server does something similar internally. And both of these are based on rollup, by the way. So whatever you do in VizHub is compatible with Vite. So we can take this same code that works locally and paste it into VizHub here, and we get the same thing. And if you ever have something developed inside VizHub, but then you want to escape out of the platform, you can export the files. You get a zip file, and in this zip file there's a basic rollup config, but actually probably what you'd want to do is create an empty Vite project and then just copy all of the files over into it, and it should all work. All right, that's how you get started with front-end development.